think it's also really for the female listeners, for the women out there, also to start looking at your man also as an emotional being, that it also has fears, it also has shame, it also has traumas,
Yeah.
that you also talk to them about it. Like, hey, is there something you want to talk about? And men usually gonna be like you said, gonna be like, no, 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 I'm not gonna talk about this, because they want to show as they're strong. They want to protect you, or they want to protect the family. But it's also, like you said, a strength, a big strength to open up and talk about it.
Right.
So I want to go to deeper layers because, like you said, with shame. Welcome to the How to Heart Show, helping men reconnect to the heart and empower others as the leaders they were born to be. I'm Vincent Hazenboom. My mission is to help you speak your truth, own your authenticity, and step into your power. The world needs the raw and authentic man right now. Join us if you're ready to make a change. Hey, what's up, Lions? And welcome to the How to Heart Show. Shame. Shame is really a topic that not many people talk about, but it's still inside of us, or with trauma or things that happen to us. And I've been also ashamed about my own life and about myself. And I felt I really wanted to bring somebody in to talk about this topic. So I brought Bekah George. I think I say your last name correct. And she is a mental health therapist for almost 15 years, and she really loves to talk about this topic. So I really wanted to connect with her and talk about this topic. So I really want to introduce you to Bekah. So Bekah, welcome to the show.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, me too. And like I said, for me, shame, it's been tough and still is, because now I'm working with a psychologist. And sometimes when I talk, I just look at the ground. And he said to me, yeah, there's still some shame in stored inside of you, that I
Yeah.
also want to talk to you about, the shame that's stored inside of our body. But before we're going to go there, who is Bekah, and why are you so passionate about speaking, and why did you become a therapist, and why the trauma or the shame? What was so attracted you to be so caught up with the shame as a topic?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I have been a mental health therapist for 15 years. Like you said, I've been in the field for almost 20, and I've seen so many people deal with shame time and time again. And shame is one of those things that keeps people back so much from being able to do anything in their life that they really should be able to do or they want to do, right? And so I've really like helped people process through this for years, but as I started realizing, like, people didn't realize that their shame was what was holding them back from things. And it was really showing back up in their life currently from 20, 30, 40 years ago. I mean, there's people who are in their 70s and they're still dealing with shame of things that happened when they were 15. And so I saw it come up time and time again. And then with my own life, I saw it happen multiple different ways. And so after I started realizing that some of the things I was going through was actually a result of shame, once I started dealing with that, it changed my whole life. So I've grown up with a weight problem. I had struggled with my weight for my whole life, and there's this shame that came with being an overweight female, and it was just a constant thing that I felt like I always had to battle. And I got up to 330 pounds and couldn't seem to get over this food addiction, and I always just thought that I was just going to be that big my whole life, and I was always going to deal with that. And when I started realizing that it was actually shame from some things that happened to me as a child that made me believe that I didn't deserve anything better than that, I realized that the weight was actually a physical symptom of the things that I, had encountered with shame. And so once I started dealing with shame, I was able to, lose 130 pounds. I was able to, start a business. I started realizing that my poor relationships, my poor romantic relationships, were because I allowed men to treat me badly because of shame. And that's when I realized that shame actually holds us back from things that people don't even recognize are connected. I'm a therapist, and I didn't even recognize that it was connected, in my life in certain ways. So that's when I started getting really passionate about it, started diving in, reading about shame, how it affects people, all about the different kinds of shame. And and just really learning a lot about it. And then I started speaking actually at domestic violence meetings and shelters and things like that, because I have experienced domestic violence in my past. And I just fell in love with speaking. And that's what I feel like my calling is to really share about how to get out of shame and how to break free from that to be able to do anything that you want to do.
Okay. So yeah, Becca, thank you so much for sharing. And yeah, she was talking a really good topic, and also about herself and what she's going through. But my camera just cut, so I have to catch back. But what fascinated me is really what you said, what shame does to you. You were like overweight, so you connected with that shame. Also your relationships were struggling with it as well. So shame can be really powerful to put you really in a small place and struggle in life as well. And I start with myself with my own insecurities as well, and with shame, because I didn't have any relationships with women. I didn't have any sexual intercourse with women. And when I was talking to people and they talked about their sex life, I felt so ashamed because I didn't have that. I felt really like, oh, there's something wrong with me. But there's nothing wrong
Mm-hmm.
with me because I had, yeah, shame about being a virgin as such a long time. But now that I see and think about it, there's nothing to be shamed about. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
also a good way to start for us to start with the shame and then nothing to be shamed about. So what is actually shame?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, honestly, a lot of people think shame and guilt are the same thing. And I like to compare it to guilt because I think it's easier to understand. So, guilt is feeling badly about something you did, right? Guilt is I did something bad and I feel bad. Shame is I'm bad. So, shame
Mhm.
is really internalizing guilt and it's making it about who you are intrinsically as a person. So, when you said there's something wrong with me, you were completely right when it comes to shame. That's exactly what shame tells you. Shame tells us that there's something wrong with us, that we're not like other people, that we're, disgusting, or that we're not good enough in some way. So it really attacks our worthiness.
Yeah, that's it. I felt not worthy enough. I didn't feel good enough with women as well because I felt so ashamed about not being like other people.
Mm-hmm.
And that haunted me for my entire life, asking myself, what is wrong with me and why is this happening to me and why can I not talk with women and go to the next level? And yeah, it's really hard because also you're gonna talk to yourself like I'm not good enough, and if you're gonna go deeper and deeper and deeper. So what is it for you that you saw in your therapy years that come up the most between men and women? What is the difference between shame with men and women? Because I talked to you a little bit and I got really inspired with Brene Brown's work, and she was also going with shame and she was only working with women, and then later she found
Mm-hmm.
out that man was also really shamed, and that changed everything for her. So how was it for you?
Yes, it's very similar. So, I specialize with sexual trauma, and so I really dealt a lot with sexual abuse survivors in my early years of therapy, and that's really what I dealt with, and I really focused in on women. But the more that I started realizing that men also deal with shame, the more that I realized that that's actually a harder thing for them to share about than women, right?
Hmm.
And so women a lot of times they have of course the shame when it comes to any kind of sexual molestation or rape, anything that has to do with their bodies. That's usually the number one thing that I see with women. They either don't feel good enough, or they feel like society says we're supposed to look a certain way, or we're supposed to be sexy all the time, we're supposed to be perfect, we're supposed to be curvy, but we're not supposed to be fat. There's all of these things that we're supposed to be that creates shame for us. So those are the biggest things that I see in women is sexual trauma and body image. When it
Hmm.
comes to men, it's really more about shame about how they want to express their emotions. So some kind of shame about like they have been told that they're not supposed to express their emotions. So anytime they express the emotion, there's shame there. There's obviously a really high level of shame with sexual assault when it comes to men as well, because they actually feel much less like they can speak up about any kind of sexual assault or abuse. And so a lot of times when you start talking to a man who has experienced that, the shame is even higher than a woman. And so it's really, that is a big piece of it as well. But with men, I think a lot of it is their emotions and feeling like they have to be strong all the time. And if there is any kind of emotion that shows, it feels like there's that shame there. Also, another piece that men struggle with a lot is their image. So not as much physical image as women do, but their status, right? So money and feeling like they have, the occupation that they want, and feeling like they have the security that they want women to enjoy, right? So women's more about their physical looks, men is more about like what they do and than their looks.
Yeah, I can really relate with that as well because I always felt I had to have this killer six pack body and I need to look towards women because I always believed that women was focused on men on their looks. But it's the other way around. For men, it's more about the appearance of women, but for women, it's more about the masculinity, how you show up,
Exactly.
how you present yourself. If you're, like you said, with your emotions, how you handle with it, how you deal with it. And well, that was a really key learning for me as well to learn about the emotions because, like you said, as men, we don't want to share emotions because it's weakness in society. You're as a man, you need to be tough, you need to be strong, and weakness it's not good. Then you're just people are gonna see you different, or women's gonna reject you, but it's not. It's so powerful to share what you feel and not share all the time, but it's good to share. And I think, yeah, we as men, we need to open up more. Well, I know for sure we need to open up more and talk about our feelings because it's like you said, if you're gonna hold it up together, you're just gonna explode. You're just gonna
Right. We need to teach men that it's okay to express their emotions and that that's actually not weakness, that's strength. But we
exactly,
also need to teach women that it's okay for men to express that, right? Because there are so many times where men have come forward and been emotional and women have shut them down because they have this view of men as it's supposed to be this or it's supposed to be that because were taught the same things in society. Women, it's okay for them to be emotional, it's okay for them to cry or be, too emotional, but men, if you cry, there's a problem. You're a wuss, you're all of these
exactly.
things. And so we also have to teach women to say, like, no, actually, this is a beautiful thing. If your man can embrace that, it actually helps with the emotional understanding and reasoning and communication and vulnerability and all of these things. But a man really needs a safe place to be able to do that. And a lot of women don't understand that.
Yeah, I agree, and I think a lot of relationships just crumble under that because there's no understanding, no understanding between the
Absolutely.
relationship, but also the man. The man also has emotions. The man also needs to cry, and we as men, we need time for ourselves. Maybe we need to go to our man cave or hang out with friends. And women, they just do their own things, and they're gonna go with girlfriends, and the next day they forgot. But with men, we just yeah, we need time, and I think it's also really for the female listeners, for the women out there also to start looking at your man also as an emotional being, that it also has fears, it also has shame, it also has traumas,
Yeah.
that you also talk to them about it, like, hey, is there something you want to talk about? And men usually gonna be like you said, gonna be like, no, 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 I'm not gonna talk about this, because they want to show as they're strong, they want to protect you, or they want to protect the family. But it's also, like you said, a strength, a big strength to open up and talk about it.
Right.
So I want to go to deeper layers because, like you said, with shame, it can be anything. With the body, it can be with emotions, it can be anything. But how is it related with trauma? Because I think there it all starts with the trauma, and then it comes to shame, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of times trauma, it's stored in our bodies. And so we have all of this trauma that happens that we don't always know how to process. So our brains are very much like filing cabinets. They file things away every single day. And then something traumatic happens and it's like, I can't file this away. Something bigger that happened today. And I don't know what to do to process this. And so we store it in our body, right? And a really good book to read if you haven't already is The Body Keeps Score. Trauma being stored in the body, and it really is really helpful to understand that. But trauma brings about shame a lot of times because we believe after we've gone through a traumatic experience that no one else has ever experienced that, or no one else could fully love me if they knew all the things that I had done or all the things that had been happened to me, right? And so then we just create this shame for whatever reason. We see ourselves in a different light than other people do, and so or then we see other people in. And so a lot of times we can't have compassion for ourselves in the same way we would have compassion for someone else, and that just brings about trauma it brings about shame, and shame in its very nature grows in the dark. So if you don't bring it to light and you don't address it, then it's going to grow, because then the longer you take to process it and talk about it and bring it to light, the bigger and bigger it's going to be. It's like feeding it.
Yeah, I agree. You have to talk about it, even though if it's really shameful, still you have to open up because what
Mm-hmm.
I like what you said was we think we are alone with this shame. We think we are alone with this problem or with this physical problem or mental problem, but it's not. There are millions of people that are dealing with the same emotions, with the same shame or fears. But that's really funny, right? That we think it's only us and nobody else has
Right.
it, only us. And it's also what you see in this perfect society with social media. They show how perfect their lives is, but deep down inside they're just missing, or they're just not connecting with their inner child, or the trauma still running over the place. So I
Mm-hmm.
think it's really good also what you said, to understand your traumas or understand your shame, because if you do that, then it's going to be a lot easier to cope with it. And what is it really to what can you do about that, about understanding your shame? What is some things that you can recommend that people can do?
The first thing is really identifying it. No, nothing can be done without identifying it, right? And so typically, some people will tell me, I don't have anything that brings me shame. And I disagree with that. Most people have something that brings them shame, right? They're just used to shoving it down. And so a lot of times I'll start with people and say, like, where is an area where you've tried and tried in your life to break through something and you haven't been able to break through? Because usually there's something there that's holding you back in that area, right? And then I'll start talking about their childhood, and I'll start talking to them about some experiences that they had as a child, how they felt, what their confidence level is. Do they have any limiting beliefs? But the first step is to identify your shame in some way. And shame looks different for everybody, So a lot of people think that shame is just about like, oh, I was abused as a kid, or I was raped, or I was, any of these major things. And it's not that. Sometimes it's also just what society thinks we should be, right? So for an example, recently I got a house and I rented a house, and somebody came and told me, congratulations on buying a home. And I didn't correct them. I said, oh, thank you so much, because I had shame that at 37 years old as a single mom that I don't own a home yet.
Mhm.
Right. And so I immediately, like, I didn't want to say, oh, no, I don't own, I just rented. Why? Because society tells me at 37, I should own a home, especially as, a successful person who makes enough money to own a home. So then I automatically didn't do that. Right. Same with, like, sometimes I don't tell people I'm divorced, because there's a stigma with divorce still sometimes, especially in the church, because I'm a faith-based believer. So it's hard to sometimes say that. So then, really identifying that shame can look different to different people. If you feel like you should be making more money at this time in your life, you feel like you should have children already, you feel like I deal a lot with moms and dads who have hard times with their children, and they feel like because society judges them, they can't share that. They can't share that my kid is a jerk sometimes, and I get frustrated by them, or that I don't want to be a parent sometimes I just don't want to be a mom or dad, right? And so there's those things that, like, people just don't associate with shame that are actually from shame.
Yeah, I like what you said about about those things, because like you said, opening up and really share, also accept it. I think acceptance
Mm-hmm.
is really important, to accept that it's there. And like you said, we have to share light on it, because if not, you're just gonna hide it in the dark and you're not gonna see it. And it's like I said,
Right.
it's normal. Everybody has shame.
Yeah. So the first step is identifying it. After that, it's really, like you said, shining light on it, telling someone. Specifically, there's what's frustrating is that society has allowed certain things to be less shameful and certain things to be more shameful, right? For example, it's not, society doesn't judge women as much anymore when they come forward and say, I was in an abusive relationship. But if a man comes forward and says, I was in an abusive relationship, society judges him, right? Society doesn't judge rape as much anymore. But if a woman was wearing, clothes that were provocative and she was raped, there's going to be judgment, right? Which is ridiculous, but that's how it is. So that's the frustrating thing, is that society continues to perpetuate these things. And sometimes we have to say to ourselves, it doesn't matter what people think, it doesn't matter what society says, it doesn't matter if there's going to be people who judge you regardless, but I'm going to deal with this because it's impacting my life. Because every traumatic event that we experience, and everything that brings about shame, makes us put on a lens that we see life through. I then see you and the world and everything else through this lens of shame. And like you said, like that child self comes back up, and you're no longer responding to a lot of these situations as a 35-year-old, but instead as a 5-year-old. And so it's really just identifying it, bringing it to light, challenging it, and uprooting it and replacing it with something that is actually true.
Yeah, you have to take action. If you're just gonna read books and just sit there and be feeling sorry for yourself, it's not gonna change anything. So also taking action is really important. I know it's scary, I know it's difficult, but you have to do it, because if not, you're gonna be stuck. You're gonna
Yeah.
be stuck with the shame. And like I said, there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing to be ashamed of. So how was it for you, Becca, to face your fears and see your shames for what it is and want to make a change, because it was holding you also back.
Yeah, and it still, is very difficult. There's times where I don't like to share my story sometimes, because I know that there's going to be judgment, or I know there's
Mhm.
going to be people who look at me and judge. And there's certain times where, specifically, my domestic violence situation, I was in a really abusive relationship for a few years, and I had a lot of people judge me for that. Like, you're a therapist and you didn't see the signs. And I did see the signs. I just was too scared. And also, I had such a low self-esteem that I believed that it was okay for men to abuse me because of my appearance, right? And so sometimes it's difficult to go on and talk on podcasts about, hey, I got myself into this situation because I know better. As a therapist, I know the signs of narcissism. I know these things, and yet I still got into it. Like I said, part of being part of the church and being in a Christian background, I really was kind of the black sheep of my family and of some other, of the community being divorced, right? And so there's all of these things that sometimes I don't like to talk about. But then I recognize that if you have, not just you, but if anybody has an issue with the things that I say, it's more about them than it is me. It's because they don't know how to handle their own pain, and so they have to project that onto me. And I have to realize too that that's part of my story, and it's part of what makes me strong now, and it's a part of my testimony to share to people. So it's definitely not been easy. And I'm actually almost done with writing a book now about my journey through shame.
Oh, cool.
And I'm hopefully going to get it published in the next few months. And, it really was difficult to put some of those things on paper, because I know how people respond to certain things, and certain things that are going to be judged. And so it definitely is difficult, but I had to get to a place where I wanted to help other people heal enough that I didn't care. So, for example, I remember I had the biggest amount of shame for my weight. That was something that I started from a young age of having shame, from 5 or 6 years old. And I never told anyone how much I weighed. No one I was in a relationship with knew how much I weighed. I didn't even weigh at the doctors. I refused. I would not step on the scale. And I always lied about how much I weighed. And at one point, I felt like I needed to share, as I was sharing my journey through this shame and losing weight. I felt like I needed to share on social media my actual weight as I was losing weight. And that was probably one of the hardest things I've ever done, because I was afraid that I was going to be rejected. I think when I put it out there, I started at 286 pounds is when I posted it. And I remember thinking, most people don't understand how a woman could get to be 300 pounds. Most people don't understand that. And so I really was afraid of the judgment and afraid of the shame that came from that. Overweight people aren't treated very well, right? So I knew that there was going to be one of those things where people were going to have a backlash about it. And it was actually one of the most freeing things I've ever done, because over time, now I can tell people, even though I'm not where I want to be yet, I can tell people exactly how much I weigh, and there's no shame there anymore, because it is what it is. I've brought it up. All the ins and outs of it. And if I'm going to tell you that I'm worth more than how much I weigh, then I have to be willing to say, I need to detach myself from the shame, right? So it hasn't been easy, but it's been an incredible growth process.
And I really want to congratulate on sharing and also doing what you're doing, because I know it's really, really difficult, especially when overweighted people. I know there's a lot of shame because also how people look at you. And I
Oh,
think
yeah.
that's the thing. How are people gonna look at you? And that's also connected with rejection, like you said.
Absolutely. And I
And
think
that,
shame almost always comes from fear. There's some kind of fear,
yeah,
fear of rejection for the most part, because we all as people have a desire to be accepted. Whether you pretend like you do or don't, you do. And so, anything that brings about rejection where we feel like we're going to be apart from other people who are like us, then, that causes a fear to rise up inside of us.
yeah, that's the thing. Always fear, fear what other people think of us, or fear of how people gonna react, or fear what people gonna say when we do this or we're
Mhm.
gonna do that. There's always this fear, and I can see with my own life when I also, like you, I was in a toxic relationship, and after when I broke up with the relationship, I was really like angry. Like, why is this happening to me? Why is it? Why is this always happening to me? Why do I always attract this kind of people? But
Mhm.
then I put this mirror in front of myself, and then I saw it was like, oh, it's me. It's not them,
Right.
it's me. That's also
Right.
really
That's a
important to,
hard thing to say. It's hard,
yeah, because
especially
I,
when people mistreat you, because it isn't
yeah,
your fault that they're mistreating you, but it is your fault that you continue to attract those people because you're not working on the inside and saying, I
exactly.
deserve better than this.
Exactly, because I was
Mhm.
hiding it. I was before my relationship, I was hiding it. I was gaming. I was pushing it away. I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to feel it. But you're gonna attract people because they want to show you what you have inside. They want to put light on it, and people are gonna be like the mirror or the reflection of what you need to see. And that for me was hard, but like you said, really necessary for you to move on. You're gonna meet people that's gonna push you and trigger you, but they're gonna help you. It sounds really weird, but it's gonna help you to overcome or see those flaws that you have inside of you.
Yeah.
And yeah, it
And
wasn't,
people are always going to judge one way or the other. I was judged
yeah.
all the time when I was really big. And now I'm judged because people will say things like, don't lose too much weight or don't get too small. I like that you're curvy, right? Men, I hear this all the time. People used to tell me when I was bigger, oh, you're going to find your dream man once you reach your goal weight. But then when I started losing weight, people say, oh, men don't like skinny girls, don't get too skinny, and it's like, you're going to judge me no matter what I do. So I might as well do what I want to do and look the way I want to look and be the person I want to be because you're going to judge me either way, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. You have to do what feels right for you, because society is going to tell you what you may look like, but in
Mhm.
the end, you're going to feel miserable because it's not you. And then
Right.
it's going to feed the shame. It's going to feed the fear. It's going to feed the anger because you're always trying to be approval to other people. And there's not a way to live. You're only going to, yeah, dig a grave
Right.
for yourself because it's going to be stressful. It's going to be hard, and you don't want to go there. So, yeah, I want to ask you a couple more questions. I think for really important for the listeners is, yeah, I'm not sure how to really ask this question, but we talked about what they can do, but it's also really important to talk with somebody, because I think that's the hardest, because I saw it with myself. I refused to go and see as a psychotherapist. But now that I did it, I'm so happy that I took the step
Mhm.
to see somebody that can help me, because I wanted to do everything alone because
Yeah.
I didn't feel safe. But what can you tell people about taking those actions to see somebody, to see a therapist or a psychologist or someone that can help you? Or for if you want to lose weight, there's nothing to be ashamed of. You can also to talk with somebody that can help you to lose the weight. So what
Right.
can you do to take that first step to really, because it's the monkey mind is like, no, don't do it. It's dangerous and stay home. And what can you do to change that? Because you also mentioned limiting belief, and that's really what's holding you back as well. That monkey mind is telling you not to do things because it's scary or dangerous. So what can they do to take that step to free themselves?
So our brains do whatever it has to protect us, right? Like that's how our brains work. And
Yeah.
so it's really important to remind ourselves that sometimes we continue to do things that no longer serve us because it worked at some point in our life, right? And so maybe at some point you felt like you needed to, there's fight, flight, or freeze, right? And so maybe at some point you felt like you needed to freeze and pretend like something wasn't there, or you needed to, just shove it down. And that was able to help you survive a really traumatic experience in your life. However, it's important to challenge that and recognize that that's not necessarily healthy. That the healthiest way to deal with it is to talk through things, and that you also don't have to have a major trauma to need to go to therapy. Every person needs therapy in some way.
Yeah.
because we don't get through this life unscathed. This life is hard. And so there's always going to be those things that, we can work through. And so the first thing is really just identifying that, hey, that it would be good for me just to talk to someone no matter what the situation is. Also recognizing that, like, there are going to be people who judge you, or there's going to be people who misunderstand therapy. And it doesn't even have to be therapy. Maybe you want to start with coaching. Coaching is actually a step towards therapy, where you may not be able to address as much of the trauma, but you can at least start digging some of those things up. I've had clients come to me who have said, I'm not ready for therapy, full-blown therapy yet, because I don't really want to think about all the things that happen, but I would like to start talking about some of the things I need to work on, right? So that I can know what to do in therapy. And it kind of gets you used to at least talking to someone. It makes it a little bit more comfortable and makes you understand it a little bit better. So that's the step you could take as well. And also just recognizing, like, I think men have a harder time with therapy than women, because, again, it's the emotional piece of things. They feel like they shouldn't be opening up and talking about their emotions, and they don't need it. And then also just, the stigma that comes along with therapy, but there really shouldn't be one. And so it's really just saying, like, do I want to be the best version of myself, or do I want to continue being the way that I am now? And if you want to be the best version of yourself, I definitely suggest talking to someone. It doesn't have to be forever. Same with medication. If you decide to get on depression meds or anxiety meds or medicine for PTSD or something like that, it doesn't have to be forever. It can be a short-term thing that helps you to get over that hump, to work on things, and then you can, slowly wean yourself off with the doctor, and so it doesn't have to be something that's forever. Same with therapy. You can do it for a period of time, and maybe come back in 10 years for booster sessions, right? It doesn't have to be all the time. So it's really just about, like, sometimes though we'll wait for motivation, and I always say motivation comes after after action. So a lot of times we won't be motivated to do the things that are hard. Like, I know I don't get motivated to go to the gym until I'm at the gym. You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
then once I get to the gym, I'm like, okay, now I'm motivated to actually do something. So sometimes you have to just do the work, which is putting on your shoes and, putting on your socks and getting your water bottle and heading to the gym. And it's metaphorically the same with trauma and shame, is saying, you know what, I don't feel like doing it right now, but I know it's going to make me a better version of myself. So I'm going to lace up my shoes and get to work.
Yeah, that's really important what you're telling yourself. If you tell yourself I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna stay in bed and watch Netflix and eat potato chips, then you're gonna do that. But if you really want to make a change, it's a decision that you have to make. Do you
Yeah.
really want it, or don't you, or not? And I think that's the start, making the decision to take a step to wanting to make a change, because if you're gonna keep going at it, you're gonna be the same person 10 years from now. So
Yep.
if you want to make the change, like I said, it's a decision that you make, but it's so important to also to see within and and feel what's important to you, not what other people want
Mhm.
from you, what you want. Do you want to go to the gym to feel better, to look better? Do that. You have to start looking at yourself and what's important to you. So, Becca, for my last question, what advice can you give to the listeners if they really struggle a lot with shame? What is the steps that they can do? What are your top 5 advices that you can give?
Yeah, really, first of all, finding help, right? So recognizing, like, okay, I feel like I need help. So whether that is a therapist, whether that is a psychologist or psychiatrist, whether that is a coach, or even just an accountability partner in the beginning. Maybe you just call someone and say, hey, I just want to talk through something with you. Are you willing to talk to me about it, right? Or I'm going to try to start showing my emotions a little bit more. Can you help me and ask me if I'm doing that? Maybe that's the first step. But don't be lackadaisical about it. Don't be lazy about it. Like, get up and do something, right? So that's the first step, is really doing something. The second step is identifying it. So do the work to look at what has caused you this pain, right? And so looking at, how do I view the world? There's certain things that cause us to view the world differently and view other people differently. If there's certain things that bring up emotions in you, like maybe you meet a person who has a certain personality and that really bothers you, there's probably a reason for that, right? If there's an emotion that you avoid, there's probably a reason for that. If there's an area in your life that you feel like you can't get past a certain level, there's probably a reason for that. Look at your self-talk. How do you talk to yourself, and start there? If there's some harshness in how you talk to yourself, that's a good place to start. And then just, start making lists of some of the things that you want to address in your life, and not so that you overwhelm yourself, but so that you have somewhere to start. And then just choose one of them. Just choose one. And one thing that really helps me and helps my clients is to say, how do I show up today as the person I want to be tomorrow? So an example of that is I still want to be a fit person who is athletic and loves to move their body and eats healthy, right? But at 330 pounds, I was not that person. And so what I had to say to myself was, how would a fit person respond in this situation? Would a fit person go and eat their feelings? Would a fit and healthy person go and, eat a lot more than they needed? No. So recognizing, like, what would a healed person do in this situation? What would someone who doesn't have the shame do in this situation? And start making that step towards becoming that person today, so that they show up as that. Another thing that can really help you is to keep motivation, is to record yourself in a moment when you have a lot of motivation. So the thing is, a lot of times we have a lot of motivation, we're excited, like New Year's will happen, and we're all excited about, like the new things that are coming, and those are the moments where we have that motivation. Sometimes, a Monday will come and we're like, yeah, we're all motivated to like change and make these changes. So one thing I suggest is recording yourself in those moments of motivation and say, this is the person that you can be. So even in the moments where you feel like laying there and watching TV and eating potato chips, you can watch back that video and remind yourself of those feelings, and remind yourself that all feelings are valid, but not all feelings are true. And so if you have those moments of, I feel overwhelmed, or I feel like I can't do this, watching that video back or listening to the audio of your own voice a lot of times can cause your brain to recognize, okay, I need to do something about this. So those are just a few steps to kind of get you moving in the right direction.
Yeah, those are really, really good tips. And I really like the things that you said about, yeah, talking to yourself, looking at yourself, but actually awareness of the monkey mind is telling you, no, don't do that, or awareness that you want to grab some cookies or something
Mm-hmm.
to feed the shame, because that's what we do. We feed the shame. I've been a porn addict like most of my life because I was ashamed of what I had in my youth or in my childhood, that I was feeding that off. That was my way of dealing with it. But there's a lot of people that dealing with shame is to eat cookies or to this depression eaters. That's something that's
Right.
really, yeah, we always looking for something to nurture ourselves.
To
So we can
fill.
also
Yeah. I mean, some people drink, some people smoke cigarettes, some people smoke
exactly.
marijuana, some people use sex or relationships that are unhealthy. I mean, and what's crazy is that people judge each other's, coping, right? Like, as somebody who eats food, I can look at a drug addict and say, well, that's unhealthy. I can't believe they did that. But it's the same thing. I'm still killing myself with food, right? Or I'm still killing myself with toxic relationships. We just like to judge other people because it's easier than looking at ourselves and realizing, oh, I am addicted to, I can't make it through a day without caffeine, or I can't make it through a day without Netflix and disassociating and just staring off into space. I can't make it
Mhm.
a day without wine at the end of the night or whatever. Like, these are all unhealthy coping skills that help us. Sometimes even exercise can be. If you exercise 2 times a day and it's like in order to, have this rigorous like feelings of perfection, that comes from somewhere of a place of shame, right? So even good things can be bad when it's done with the wrong motivation.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And that's really important to look what's important for you, but also if it's serving you. That's also really
Mm-hmm.
important. If you're gonna on Netflix, is it gonna serve you? If you're gonna go to the
Yeah.
gym 5 days a week, is that gonna serve you? Is it not gonna damage your health? So also be aware of that as well. I think that's really, yeah, I think that's a good start for to if you really want to start to make a change, be aware of what your actions are, what the things that you do, and from there you're gonna make the change. And what Becca said, yeah, that's really important. Everything that you've been telling in this 45 minutes, it's so important. It's so important to start with that. You don't have to be free from shame tomorrow. Take those small
Mm-hmm.
steps. Take those small
Yeah.
steps and start within, and not what other people think of you and what's important to them. No, look at you. What's important to you.
Yeah.
So Becca, I want to thank you so much for this interview, because yeah, this has also been really helpful for me. Also, I gained some nuggets as well, and think for me also to go back when I'm not doing well, or I'm dealing with emotions, or I know there's some shame that I'm working on. I can always listen to this episode and remind myself. So, Bekah, thank you so much for your time. And how can the followers or how can the people that are listening follow you and check out what you're doing?
Yeah, so I love making new connections. I love talking to people. So I'm on Facebook. You can just search for me. It's Bekah George, and it's spelled Bekah. You can find me on there. I'm on Instagram at the real Bekah Dawn. And so Dawn's my middle name. That's what I go a lot of times. Also, I have a website that's for my speaking. So it's bekahdawn.com. Again, Bekah. You can find me on there. And so, yeah, definitely would love to connect in any way. I love to speak. I love to come to speaking engagements and be able to talk about shame and tell my story and help people to get over that limiting belief. So that's really my biggest passion is to speak. But I also do help people to one-on-one through coaching and therapy and things like that to be able to eradicate their shame as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm gonna put everything in the show notes so people can find you and check you out. And yeah, again, Becca, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it that you took the time to be here and have to chat with me. And this is so important. Really go deep inside yourself and start working on this because if you're not, you're gonna be stuck. And you know what? In the end of your life, you're gonna regret it because you knew you could
Mm-hmm.
have done something when you were feeling it, when you thinking about it, but you didn't had the strength or the courage to do it. So I really invite you to start doing with that because you're gonna live better and you're gonna free yourself because you're gonna be stuck. You're gonna be closed off and that's not the way of living. You're so
Yeah.
much more than what other people think of you or what society really, really sees you. It's important
Yeah.
what you are and start with that. And yeah, I think that's a good closure. So Becca, thank you. And yeah,
Thank
take
you for
care.
having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. Hey, Lions. Thank you for listening on this journey with me to reconnect with your heart. If you like the show, please like and drop a 5-star rating. And to help us keep the show going, consider supporting one of our affiliate offers. How do you raise your vibration? For an easy way to raise your vibration and support your health using biofeedback, check out the Healy tool. I'm a rep for it because I believe in frequency healing. Check the show notes for details. See you next time.